All right. Next in your process, you're going to confirm your data inputs. So you've got to figure out either what do you need or what do your customers need. Have some type of process in place to collect that information. Typically, it's an MRP system. We'll talk about that in our class on supply chain technologies and performance metrics. A lot of times, it's good to know historically what you've done in the past, as well as what are you thinking about. Like, what do you expect the volumes to look like in the future? You also want to tease out any kind of seasonal demand. If you're a furniture company and you sell a ton of products, right before kids go to college or maybe right after tax season, you want to know that so you can accommodate that in your network. Next up, you obviously have to know where things are shipping from, right, and where they're shipping to. So origin is where it's coming from, destination is where it's ending up. And then obviously on the packaging side, like what does this look like? How do we ship it? Are there any restraints or constraints on how this product can be packaged or shipped? You need to understand that, both on the inbound and the outbound side. So then you're going to build some kind of network design. So based on your strategy that you decided on, inbound versus outbound, lead time, all those factors, first thing you want to do is kind of look at your existing network, figure out, is there any place we should consider adding or adjusting our facilities? Do we need to put in new distribution centers or cross docks? Should we look at maybe changing suppliers? Because we have a ton of freight in the California area, maybe we should, call our Nebraska supplier and say, hey, can we ship from your California location, right? And then the goal is to figure out, like, what is our optimal solution? What is our best fit for all of this demand? And then how do we account for that when we move over to any variation with that, right? So you come up with the best case scenario, and you're going to add some buffer on both ends of it to account for that variation. And then the goal, again, this is that tail wagging the dog. Now you're going to go back to whoever's doing the ordering and figure out, is there anything we can do to level this out, this activity, so that we can control it a little bit cleaner and stabilize things. And then the final piece, and this is where a lot of times things fall apart, you have to actually call your suppliers and you have to talk to them like, hey, we would like to pick up every Wednesday at 9 a.m. from your location. How do you feel about that? Do you have any questions? Is there anything I could do to make that easier for you? It's a tough process. Like, we would do a redesign. Let's say we'd have 5 suppliers on a route delivering to a cross dock. That was typically about 15 to 20 phone calls to negotiate across those different suppliers to make sure they were comfortable. Like, well, we can't really take any more freight on Wednesday mornings. Okay, we'll do Wednesday afternoon. And then suddenly, the next supplier closes early on Wednesday. So now, okay, are we going to run out of route? Are we going to force them to be open Wednesday morning? There's a lot of factors you have to account for. But at the end of it, the goal is everyone kind of agrees and signs off on that design. So then you take those designs to your carrier base and you have to start with, do you have a solid relationship in place with your carriers? If carriers see you as just like, these are some folks we can make some money on, they always try and, get as cheap of a rate as possible from us, we don't value their relationship, you're going to struggle to get, competitive market rates. So your goal is to create kind of a high level, hey, we're going to run from Central Kentucky to Chicago twice a week with our new design. So, we'd like to run 100 loads in a year from Lexington or Central Kentucky to Chicago. That's meaningful to carriers because suddenly they can say, hey, we've got trucks based there and we've got freight in Chicago. We'd like to get back to Lexington. Let's give them a more aggressive rate, right? So you figure out like which of those carriers match your network, and you send bids out to those carriers and say, hey, we would like you to consider running these loads. The carriers get back to you with, this is the price we would charge to move that freight, and then you identify which carriers should be given the business based on the quality of service, their on-time performance, all that. and you actually award them business. You say, hey, you are our first choice every week to run these loads, right? And then you have some backup plans in place. You don't want to, say like you'll always have 2 loads, because sometimes the volume may not be there, and sometimes you may need 3 trucks in a week, right? So you try and kind of keep it at a little bit of, I guess, ambiguous level, if at all possible. And then figure out seasonality. There's this wonderful thing called produce season in the Southeast, where suddenly all your best friend truck drivers stop answering their phones because they've got watermelon or onion or citrus growers who will pay them literally 5 or 6 times market rate just to move their fresh produce to market. So you have to account for that when you're giving out prices. So if you do have a network that is affected by produce season or something seasonal, you probably want to pay a little extra the entire year so that people will answer the phone in those peak demand times. So you don't have to scramble or overpay for transportation during those peak times. So the next step, this is kind of mundane. Within a certain window, you're going to look at, okay, we're not looking at forecasts anymore. This is what we're actually needing from our suppliers, and then you're going to apply packaging to that to see what kind of volume you're actually looking at, and then you're going to look at your plan and say, hey, if we left our plan alone, would this route run according to plan? Is it under 26 pallets? Is it over, let's say, 20 pallets? Right? We want it to be efficient. If it's not, you're going to adjust it. Then you'll send out loads to your carriers. They'll have a chance to either accept or reject that load, and then you're going to communicate that plan out to your suppliers and say, hey, now this isn't like a plan out in the future. Now this Wednesday at 9 a.m. a truck from JB Hunt, and the driver's name is Bob, is going to show up at your dock at 9 a.m. and these are the parts you're going to put on it, right? So you've gone from like theoretical high-level strategy to very, very tactical and realistic scenarios. So then you run the loads, right? So the suppliers tell you exactly what they're shipping. The carriers let you know when they arrived, when they left. Any issues that come up, they have to be communicated, as soon as possible. If someone ships what they're supposed to, and the carrier picks up and delivers when they're supposed to, there is no communication, right? There's a skit, I think it's Chris Rock, like, what do you want, a cookie, right? Same type of thing. Like, it doesn't matter when there's things running according to plan. In fact, you don't want to hear about those things, right? Those are out of sight, out of mind. What you want to focus on are the exceptions, right? Like, what did not go according to plan, so that you get rid of all the noise. Okay, you shipped on time? Awesome. Great. We'll give you a gold star. You did not ship on time? Okay. Which part numbers? When can you have them ready? Let's figure out a plan to recover those parts, right? Oh, we've got a truck that's 4 hours late? Okay, let's deal with that instead of getting confirmations that these 10 trucks delivered on time, right? First time I've used Chris Rock in a lecture. You guys will have to tell me how it goes. Next up, you're just going to kind of zoom out a little bit now that you've got some data and say, was this effective? Like, did we do a good job? Did suppliers provide good fill rate? Did carriers hit good on-time performance? And you're going to deal with suppliers through the scorecard process to fix those problems. All right. The last thing we'll cover kind of as part of this lecture is the scenario 2 file. So we've done something crazy here. We've added a cross dock. The cross dock sits in Gary, Indiana, which is just outside of Chicago. I've been a little bit nicer to you. Instead of having to do the orders and packaging to figure out how large the shipments are, I've actually just given you the volumes, which means I've already computed the volumes for you. You do have to pay a little fee for running freight through a cross dock. So just to explain what a cross dock looks like, so we've got these 3 suppliers, and our current plan was to ship things, straight north to plant, I think that's plant 1, and then straight or northwest to plant 2. There's still some distance where these trucks are going that maybe it's not quite optimal. So another scenario is consolidate all this freight and fill it up as much as possible and ship it to a cross dock. So a cross dock is a place where you take maybe one supplier's freight that's meant for 2 plants, you deliver it to the cross dock, and a truck leaves from there to this plant, and another truck leaves from the cross dock and goes to the other plant. Okay, so it's just it's a way to make sure trucks run really, really efficient, and then kind of breaking it down and delivering it to the final destination. So this is kind of like the mailman walking into an apartment building. The cross dock would be kind of the mailman arriving inside of your apartment building with the big mail bag, and then you got individual mailboxes, right? So then from the cross dock you send out those individual trucks. So everything needed for the entire apartment building came all the way from the post office to the apartment building, but then the individual mailboxes are serviced from this cross dock. That may not be the best analogy, but I think it works. So instead of going direct to the plants, we're going to go to the cross dock, and then from the cross dock to the individual plants. So right now the suppliers are shipping independently to the plants based on the routing guide. Last week there were 8 truckloads, so we've increased the volume pretty considerably here, right? At a cost of just under $9,000. In the file, so there's a scenario 2 file, you'll see there is a cross dock added. And you can also see it in the distance matrix. So there's a cross dock on that last line. Also on the rates side, every time a truck comes into the cross dock, you're going to pay $150 for basically handling those cross docks. And that's just basically the cost of moving pallets around, right? And then you've got the weekly volumes. So you can see we're shipping from Johnson Controls to Plant 1, 1.4 trucks. So right now, if they're shipping direct, that means 2 trucks, right? There's really no way to consolidate that differently. Johnson Controls to Plant 2, we're doing 0.6 trucks. Again, we're just rounding up, right? So that's a whole truck once a week. And you can see the costs associated with it out to the right. That's how we come up with that $9,000. So in our future state, instead of delivering straight to the plants, everything's going to be routed through the cross dock, or as much as you need to is going to be routed through the cross dock. So what would the cost be for a managed inbound network with the cross dock in place? So again, just to kind of give you a breath here, this scenario will not appear on the exam. If this is boring or uninteresting or terrifying to you, if it's terrifying, I would encourage you to try it. But if it's boring or not interesting, just skip right over it, right? There will be some questions you'll want to think about, like the implications of using a crossdock or not, but you don't have to do the design to achieve that. So I'm going to upload the file. Feel free to play around with it, and then I'll pause the video. You'll get a chance to practice with it, and then we'll follow up, and I'll walk you through my solution, and then we'll talk implications, and we'll be done.